Good afternoon. Welcome to the February 16, 2023 Planning Commission hearing. I will call the hearing to order now at 1:02 p.m. Ms. Esparza, can we please have roll call?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll go ahead and take roll call. Chair Bonderson,
Here.
Vice Chair Bauke,
Here.
Commissioner Boss,
Present.
Commissioner DeLuccio,
I'm here.
Commissioner Lodge,
Here.
Commissioner Wardlow,
Here.
and Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
Perfect. We have quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we begin today, I just want to welcome our newest planning commissioner to the dais. We have Donald DeLuccio here, and we are finally back up to a full commission, thanks to having Commissioner Boss here as well. It's really nice to have two new commissioners for the new year, 2023, and welcome on board. All right, so with that, let's move on to our preliminary matters, and we will start with requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or ex-agenda items. Mr. Busk, do we have any today?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. We have none.
All right. Do we have any announcements or appeals, Mr. Busk?
Chair Bonderson, nothing new, but I did want to remind the commission that the appeal of the project at 621 West Mitchell-Torrena Street, that's the Santa Barbara Neighborhood Clinics, that will be heard by City Council on March 14th. And the appeal of the project at 2315 Edgewater Way was continued by the City Council to April the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. Busk. Next, we have item C, which is review, consideration, and action on the following draft Planning Commission minutes, and that is for January 19th, 2023. Are there any Planning Commissioner comments for the minutes? Commissioner Wiscombe, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a couple, they're not really corrections, they're just revisions for clarity to the minutes in my section. On page 4 of 5, under the first bullet, wastewater and water systems, and then it goes on, is an essential project, and I'd like to change "and" is to "because critical infrastructure could be threatened by sea level rise." So take out the "that" also. So take out the "and" is and the "that" and substitute the "because" in the first part of that. And on the third bullet, on page 4 of 5, projects in different departments that are working together should be noted as such instead of called out, should be noted as such for public understanding. And I have sent those corrections to the PC secretary, and they've noted them.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Are there any other comments at this time from any other commissioners? If you have any comments, you can push the button on your screen, request to speak. Going once? All right. In that case, do we have a motion? I have Commissioner Bauke.
I'd like to move adoption with the corrections noted by Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Lodge, I should have said that because I saw your name on the screen. My apologies. Getting used to the screen here. It's an ongoing process. Okay. So, Ms. Esparza, would you please go ahead and give us a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll go ahead and take the roll call vote. Commissioner Boss,
Yes.
Commissioner DeLuccio,
Abstain.
Commissioner Lodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Wardlow,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bauke,
Yes.
and Chair Bonderson.
Yes, thank
Motion
you.
passes. Thank you.
We will now move on to Section D, which is public comments pertaining to items that are not on today's agenda. Ms. Esparza, do we have any in-person or remote speakers for this section?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I have not received any speaker slips, and we currently do not have any virtual participants. Back to you.
Thank you very much. We can go ahead and close the general public comment. Next, we will move on to item 3 of our agenda, which is training from the City Attorney's Office regarding procedures for conducting public business, motion making, ex parte communications, and the Ralph M. Brown Act. We have Ms. Tava Ostringer from the City Attorney's Office here to give us our training presentation. And I will go ahead and give you a moment to get yourself settled, and you let me know when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tava Ostringer, Assistant City Attorney. It's good to see you all again in the new year. Ms. DeBusk and I like to have a early year training regarding procedures and a couple legal issues in particular, the Brown Act. So ironically, you had this training almost exactly a year ago on February 17th. So it's going to be familiar to some of you, but hopefully the refresher will still be good. The topics we're going to be talking about today involve a high-level overview of the Brown Act, due process, making motions, and making findings. So the order of the presentation is intended to start with the broad, overarching transparency issue that we find in the Brown Act, and then we'll move on to due process, ex parte communications, which involves communications from the public, and then how you make your motions, and then finally, how we support those motions through the findings. There's various sources of information that I use to put this presentation together. Obviously, the Ralph M. Brown Act that's in the government code. The League of Cities, if anyone's interested in a deep dive into the Brown Act, has a nice set of guidelines and handouts. Also, your Planning Commission guidelines that were recently adopted in 2022. There's reference to City Council guidelines, which are merely for reference purposes. We've tried to mirror the Planning Commission guidelines as close as possible to the City Council guidelines. And then the Rosenberg Rules of Order, which we've adopted through the Planning Commission guidelines, which is a much more user-friendly than the prior Roberts Rules of Order that we were using. And then finally, the League of California Cities has a publication on meetings and procedures, which is a really great reference, particularly for anyone that wants to chair a meeting or vice chair. I'm happy to provide you all with links to any of these sources. If you're not able to find them, just please reach out to me. So our office gives in-depth Brown Act training, but that's not what we're going to do today, because I had a lot of other areas I wanted to cover to touch base on some procedural issues that you'll be encountering as you serve on the Planning Commission. But what I did want to talk about today is really the purpose of the Brown Act, so that we understand why we apply it. I think that's helpful in moving forward, particularly as sometimes we find that the Brown Act is a little bit cumbersome. And then also serial meetings, which really is communications that are occurring by council members outside of the Brown Act. And I think these two topics are really the most important in how you operate in your day-to-day practice as planning commissioners. So the Brown Act is codified in Government Code Section 54950, et sequitur, and really the purpose of it is all about transparency. The purpose, as stated in the statutes, I think really captures what the public was feeling in 1953 when they enacted this set of statutes. And it's really about public participation and transparency. I've bolded two sentences that I think are really key takeaways that say it is the intent of the law that the government actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The people in delegating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. So I think the key to take away is we're public servants, and we can't serve the public who has appointed us unless we have an open and transparent government, and all of our discussions and all of our dealings are done here at this meeting where the public can participate in them. So, as you know, I think we're most familiar with, you cannot talk about an item here in this room unless it's on the agenda. I think that's the easiest one, and occasionally you'll hear me jump in and say, I think we need to stop talking about that. It's not an item on the agenda, and that's not intended in any way to embarrass anyone. It's just a way to redirect back to the agenda so that we stay on topic, and anything we discuss, the public has the ability to know about and participate in. What is a little more nuanced is the communications that occur outside of this room. And under the Brown Act, you are prohibited from communicating with a majority of the planning commissioners on an item that's within your purview. So strictly from the Brown Act Government Code section, it says discussions, deliberations, or taking any action by a majority of the members of a legislative body that occur outside of a public meeting, including a series of communications of any kind that directly or through intermediaries on any item of business that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body are prohibited. And this embodies what we call serial meetings, and the serial meetings of continued conversations that may occur outside of the room. It's important to note that communications can be anything. It's just not a verbal back and forth between a commissioner. It can be a text. It can be an email. It can be social media, which I'll discuss a little later. It's just it can be notes on the dais, although you'll be here. So it's just important to keep in mind that communication occurs in various ways. And there's two ways that serial meetings occur. We refer to them as the daisy chain and the wagon wheel, and we've given them those names because it's the visual cue of how the actual violation and communication would work. Under the daisy chain scenario, think of links in a that's within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission, and then Planning Commissioner B talks to C, and then C talks to D. The danger of this daisy chain and why we encourage you to avoid any any outside communications is because, as you can see, it's possible that all four of these commissioners don't know that they have furthered this communication, because A only knows they talked to B, and C knows that they talked to B and they talked to D, but there is unaware of that middle link in the chain of B that has created the majority. So for that reason, we recommend avoid communications, even emails. If you do communicate with someone, it's a good idea to ask that commissioner if they've had a conversation with someone else, so you kind of have an idea of where that conversation has gone. It also is a good reminder to the other commissioner that to think about whether they have talked to someone else and how many people they've talked to on the commission. The second way that communication can occur in these serial meetings is the wagon wheel. We call it that because it has a hub and a spokes. So in this case, you have Commissioner A, who is the communicator and contacts Commissioners B and C, who are acting like the spokes in a wheel. And so A should know better. A should know that they can't talk to three other people if now there's a majority of them talking on an item. But it's possible that B, C, and D have no idea that this communication has occurred. And it's also possible that A could have, in this scenario, A could have talked to B and C, but not D, but then B and C in our alphabet soup, one of them has furthered the communication, so you have a wagon and a chain. The second scenario of the wagon wheel, very similar in that commissioners can't use staff as an intermediary to spread a message. So you can't, for example, ask Ms. DeBusk or myself to give an opinion that you have to the rest of the committee, because in that case, we are acting as the hub of this chain at your request. Similarly, when we give you briefings or we meet with you, which is extremely appropriate, and when we have complicated items on the agenda, we may want to meet with each of you individually. And that's okay as long as, again, we're not acting as the hub where we provide a briefing to one person and then take information that we've learned in that briefing from a commissioner and spread it to the rest of you. So in that case, we ask as a reminder to ourselves, if we are speaking to you and we make a mistake and said, oh, by the way, that's right, Commissioner so-and-so said X, Y, and Z, that you remind us that you really don't need to hear what everyone else said. And so, because we're only human too. So really, it's just about exercising care and discretion in your communication. You can communicate, as I said, with other commissioners on items within your purview. You just have to be mindful that it doesn't spread to other commissioners. And of course, you can also talk about items that are not within your purview. Obviously, we build social relationships here, and you're free to go to lunch with a majority of you, as long as you're not talking about anything that's the business of this commission. Again, feel free to communicate with staff. We're here to provide you with information, and we want to do that to help you make the best decisions you can. And there are other times and exceptions to the Brown Act when you all may come together for seminars or other public meetings, in which case I'd ask that if you can and you think of it, that you perhaps reach out to Mr. DeBusk or myself, because there are tips that we can give you on how to participate in those meetings when you're all together, so there's not a perception of potentially sidebar conversations occurring that shouldn't occur, and to make sure that it truly is a place where you can all be, where we don't have to post an agenda to identify that you'll be there. So in 2021, the legislature enacted some more stringent statutes regarding the use of social media by legislative bodies. Under AB 992, it's now, it's not just a communication with social media to a majority of the members. It only takes one member to respond to a social post to create a Brown Act violation. So the rule is a member cannot respond directly to any communication on an internet-based social media platform regarding a matter within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body that is made, posted, or shared by any other member. So that includes any type of social media that's open and accessible to the public. Obviously, the ones that come to mind are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So what you can do is you can post something to your social media page that is within the purview of the body. That's acceptable. You can also post on your social media any social thing you want about your private life. And as commissioners, if it's a post regarding something that's not within the agenda, it's acceptable to respond to that post. However, if someone has posted something on their social media page that reflects something within the purview of this board, say perhaps a height limit or a comment even on a project that might come before this body, you cannot respond to it. Just one person responding to it is a violation, and that includes likes, hearts, thumbs up, emojis, anything that would convey some sort of message. So when we talk about the Brown Act, we're talking about the communications between you. But when we talk about ex parte communications and transparency, we're talking about communications from the public that are coming to you outside of this public meeting. Ex parte means in Latin from one side only. I think it's a very appropriate title. And they're communications that commissioners receive outside a public hearing that are not received by all commissioners, applicants, and opposing parties. So the ex parte communications are only prohibited if you're dealing with certain types of governmental actions. So I wanted the three types of actions that legislative bodies often take are legislative acts, quasi-judicial acts, and ministerial acts. And it's only the quasi-judicial acts that trigger the prohibition against ex parte communications. So legislative acts are generally what council is approving. This body generally only makes recommendations to council. They are policy decisions that are generally affecting a large swath of the population. And then that they differ from quasi-judicial acts because quasi-judicial acts are a discretionary decision, which is something that you frequently make, that are affecting generally one single property owner. And then you have your ministerial acts that are approvals that have no discretionary application. So as long as the project checks all the boxes, then it can be approved. And in which case, obviously, there's no problem against ex parte communications there because there's no opportunity for you to exercise any discretion. So this distinction is important because quasi-judicial acts implicate private property rights. And so when someone has a private property right, they have a constitutional privilege to procedural due process, which means they have the right to a fair hearing. And you can't have a fair hearing if not everyone is receiving the information at the same time and in the same place and in the same manner. So prohibiting ex parte communications is really intended to level the playing field for all parties and to protect against any actual perceived bias against a commissioner by the public. So, for example, if there was a property owner applying for a conditional use permit, that decision is whether to approve that use permit is distinct and unique and has an impact on that private property and how they use their project. It may also have some implications to surrounding neighbors. And so in that case, it's important that the property owner has the ability to hear the communications, be it through public comment, that adjacent property owners might be providing to this group so that they can respond to it in kind. Similarly, it's important that they be able to get all the information from the property owner as it's disseminated to the council. So your guidelines specifically provide that ex parte contacts are substantive oral or individual written communications concerning quasi-judicial matters that occur outside of a noticed public hearing. Commissioners should avoid and discourage ex parte contacts, if at all possible, to prevent the potential for actual or perceived bias. So just wanting to point out, it's a substantive communication. It's possible that you may run into a member of the public and even at site visits, and they provide some limited information, but if it wouldn't be substantive to the decision that's in front of you, then it's not considered an ex parte communication. Also, please be advised, we address it in 5.7.1 as well, that the communication can be, ex parte communication can come in through emails or some other way that's not necessarily like a face-to-face conversation. And so if you get an email and you recognize that it hasn't been possibly given to the rest of the commission, if you could just forward it to the Planning Commission secretary, she'll make sure that everyone gets a copy. And then we'll put it in the record, the official record, and then we'll also make sure that the public has access to it as well, so that everyone has the benefit of the information. I've included the council guidelines in here just because I like the example that they provide about stating ex parte communications. So it's possible that ex parte communications occur. Members of the public don't often know that they shouldn't be talking to you about an item on the agenda, particularly if they run into you at Costco or something that they have an interest, and you're stuck in line and there's nothing you can do, so you just get the earful. If you can, it's great if you tell them, hey, this is something that the commission as a whole would love to hear. Why don't, please come and say this at the public meeting, or submit it in an email and send it to the Planning Commission secretary, and we'll make sure that it gets to them. But if that isn't enough to deter them and they keep going, what you need to do is state that you've had the ex parte communications prior to the staff presentation. So as soon as the item is opened, we'll ask if you've had any, but if we forget to ask, then just let the chair know that you need to speak. You've had an ex parte communication, identify who it was with, and then the nature of the conversation. So the city council example is, I was approached by the appellant last week, and they told me that the neighborhood traffic is much greater than the city's baseline assumptions. So this is great. It identifies who it was and what the conversation was. I like to recommend that you also, if you've had this ex parte communication, also state on the record, I had this communication. It's going to have no impact on my decision here today. Just so that the public, you're recognizing that there could be this perception that this conversation may have had some impact outside of this hearing, but this alleviates that concern that you're coming in with an open mind, ready to receive information. So after you've had your presentation, it's time to make your decisions. And as you all know, we do those through motions. Anyone can make a motion, and that includes the chair. Generally, the chair will refrain from making a motion until it's clear that no one else wants to make the motion. The reason for that is the chair controls the floor and who gets to speak. It avoids the perception or even the actual impact of the chair taking the meeting and controlling how the decision is made by jumping in early and making a motion, before any discussions may have been made by the other commissioners. The motions can be made at any time after public comment, so that's the only hard and fast rule of when we make motions. However, we generally recommend, for efficiency's sake, that the motions, making a motion waits until after all the commissioners have generally had the opportunity to discuss the item, so that you have the opportunity to benefit from everyone's comments and ideas before the motion is made, and hopefully cuts down on whether motions need to be amended. I also recommend that either the chair or the Planning Commission secretary restate the motion before you vote on it. As you know, sometimes there's a couple iterations of the motions as they're being formed, and it's really important that everyone understands what's being voted on, so that's clear. It also helps the Planning Commission secretary when she's drafting up the minutes to make sure she's captured it exactly as you want it to appear, so that there's no changing when the minutes are approved, because it's one thing to make minor changes to minutes. It's another thing to tweak the actual motion. It becomes problematic. So there's this two-step process that we're all familiar with on how we make the motion. So first, the chair recognizes a commissioner to speak and proceed with the motion. The motion is then made using the language, I move, or I would like to make a motion. And then once it receives a second, it becomes a question for debate. I like to use, or have the body use, the word I move as opposed to I would like to make a motion. We don't always do that, but the reason it's a good idea to use that action word as I move is there's been occasions where someone is saying, I'd like to make a motion, and then kind of sort of in the future or later, and then someone hears it and is really excited and it says second. And it's kind of like, well, I wasn't really making it, but sure, okay. And so it may not have been fully fleshed out, or it may have been made early. So This example of, that I provided is, you want to speak, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion, great, go ahead, and then it's, I move. And then as soon as you hear that I move language, we know we've got something live. There's the three basic motions that commonly occur for making decisions. You have your basic motion, which is the first motion that's on the floor. You have a motion to amend, and then you can have a substitute motion. A motion to amend is usually referred to as a friendly motion, and it's one that's made to facilitate a compromise to get a majority of a vote on an existing motion. The way we often do it here is a motion will be made, it's got a first, a second, and then another commissioner will ask the maker of the motion if they would be willing to adjust the motion in a certain way. If the maker of the motion and the seconder agree, then we go ahead and that's the motion. The other way it can occur that we don't usually do, but it can happen, is a member of the commission could make a motion to amend the motion in the following XYZ ways. If that gets a second, then you would vote on it, or the chair could ask if there's an objection. If there was no objection, then it becomes the motion is there amended, and that's becomes the new motion. The motion to amend is different than a substitute motion. The substitute motion is intended to basically do away with the motion on the floor. It's not intended as a compromise. It's intended to take a distinct, different action than what is being proposed. If there's a question as to whether it's an amended motion or a substitute motion, then it's up to the chair to decide. The reason this is important is because of the order that the motions are heard. If you have a substitute motion, it needs to be voted on prior to the original motion. So if, in this case, it would be a substitute motion. If it was approved, then the action's done. If the substitute motion failed, then you would move on to the basic motion or amended motion and vote on that motion. You can have more than one substitute motion, so it's just important procedurally for chairs to make sure that if that's the case, that they're keeping track of when they were made, who they were made by, and what they were as for the Planning Commission secretary, so we could take them in order. Generally, most motions are approved with a simple majority, so over half, and for this body, that's 4 commissioners. Land use decisions often require a 2/3, what we call a supermajority vote. So zoning amendments and general plan amendments require that council make that supermajority vote, but since this body is only making recommendations, we only, for a land use decision, it's only the 4 votes necessary to move it forward. Another supermajority vote on a motion is for a motion to call the question. This is intended to end the debate when you have a motion on the floor or a couple motions on the floor, in which case a planning commissioner would make a motion to call the question. If it's seconded, if it gets a 2/3 vote support, that ends the discussion right then and there, and you move on to vote on the substitute motion or motion in whatever order it occurs. Just really quickly, there's other ways that we end discussions with this body, and one of them is also a motion to adjourn, and that's just a simple majority. We move it, you adjourn the meeting, and then we'll hear the item at the next hearing. You can also make a motion to adjourn at a specific time. So this would be made earlier, if the council decided, or excuse me, the commission decided they needed to stop at 6 p.m., a hard stop at 6 p.m., you could make the motion, and then at 6 p.m., the meeting would automatically adjourn, and you would stop any discussion you had at that time. The other way is to table a motion. When you table a motion, you are making the decision to move it to a later time at the hearing. So, it could be you want to get, you have a motion on the floor, but you need to hear another item, so you're going to table it until after item 4. So motions are the action, they're the yes or the no, but what's more important is the why. The findings are the why. They're what support your decision. They're a written explanation that accompanies the motion to explain to future decision makers and the public why you can and did make the decision that you made. They're there to make sure that there are sufficient facts and evidence that's been presented to you in the record that justify the decision, whether the grant of approval or a denial. They are the backbone to any legal challenge of your decision. The courts give deference to legislative bodies, to council, and to you. And so it's important that they be able to see what the evidence was at the time that you made the decision that supports that decision. And also, decisions that may be appealed to this body, council, while they hear it de novo, which means they can take in other information and render and look at information outside of the findings that you have made, they do look to it. It's really important to them. And a lot of times when I see appeals, they'll actually just accept the findings, and it's easier for them to, when the findings are there in the Planning Commission minutes, that they just approve or deny the appeal and accept the findings. So that's why we want to make sure they're very clearly written out. They're required for all quasi-judicial decisions. So generally, most of the decisions you'll make will have these findings in them. Sometimes they're required by statute or for ordinances. For example, an interim urgency zoning ordinance requires that we state findings as to why there's an urgent reason to take a zoning amendment and not go through our standard process. They're usually uncodified, meaning they're not the part that you see in the code, but they are useful if it's a project with a lot of public interest or, a change in ordinance. And it also provides a good tool for the public and future decision makers to look back to see why an ordinance was implemented and enacted the way it was. If the statutes and the ordinances will dictate what findings need to be made to reach the approvable decision, so we'll find those in the codes. And the roadmap that you get through the ordinances that says, here's what you need in order to get to yes, here's what you need to be able to show has happened, should include the words because. We said yes because X, Y, and Z, and here's the facts that support this, or why they don't support it. It's equally as important to make sure that if you're denying a project, that your findings include what's lacking, what evidence in this record is not there such that you can't make this finding and support the project. As you know, staff usually drafts the findings for you. We do this for efficiency purposes, so you don't have to spend your time going through all the record. But you are not required to accept the findings that we provide to you. You can not accept any or all of them, or you can add to them if there's evidence that, particularly if there's evidence that's presented at a hearing that we might not have had in our back pocket, then it's appropriate to add those to the findings. And like I said, we want that to happen because we want any evidence that's going to support the project and support your decision if there's an appeal to be in the record so that the court or the city council can look at it. And I think, yes, so I am available to answer any questions either now or after public comment that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Ostringer. We do have a few questions lining up here. I'll start with Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought I saw Sheila's name first, but okay.
You saw them there in order?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Ostranger. It was really good. Back to ex parte communications, okay? I've seen at council several times, I had a conversation with the appellant or a meeting with the appellant, but there's never a topic that's talked about. And is there supposed to be a topic that's talked about? I gathered from your presentation that's, yeah.
Yes, really, there should be, if it's, particularly if it's I've heard the same thing, I had a conversation with the appellant about at the site visit about the project, and it's, ideally, it should be, I had, so that the public knows what the conversation was, so they can evaluate, and so other commissioners can ask questions about that as well. It should be, we had a talk, about the ingress and egress of this, and impact on the right-of-way from the driveway would be a better way to approach it.
Okay, good. Okay. And then you used the word conversation when talking about ex parte communications. We often, some of us get emails from applicants and, or appellants or whatever, or people opposed to projects, not appellants at that point. But, and, I read them, but I ignore them. I don't ever respond to them. And is that okay to do? Is just to, or, gee, Commissioner Wiscombe, could you meet with me regarding this project? And I just say, no, I'm sorry, I can't meet with you. But is that okay to do and not reveal it to the whole commission? Or if I get an email and I don't respond to it, which is the typical pattern, do I still need to send it off?
If you don't respond to it, it's still an ex parte communication, so it's still, if you've read it, it's been communicated to you. So the better thing to do would be to say, I received an email, I didn't respond to it, I responded to it in this way. And then the even better practice would be to send it to Mrs. Sparza or Ms. Fennessy so that they can disseminate it to the rest of the board, because it probably is valuable information that someone's trying to convey. They just probably don't know exactly how to get it to everybody in that way. It goes into the record, it's there, and the public can also see it as well.
Okay. And the only reason I ask that question is because I think sometimes we get emails and the person that's sending the emails doesn't want everyone to see it. They're sending it as, someone that, to a commissioner, oh, I know this commissioner better, I'm just going to send my thoughts on this to them. And, they don't want everyone else to see it. And I don't know, I kind of find that a violation of trust, I guess, by...
Yeah, and I understand that sentiment, and a lot of people, when they send something to a commissioner or even to staff, they don't realize that it's a public record. As soon as it's sent to you, it's
Right.
not private anymore.
Right.
And that's kind of a nice segue and a plug that I can make for the Public Records Act is everything that's, if you're using your personal phone to text about Planning Commission business, or you're using even your personal email, anything, that communication, if we get a Public Records Act request, we're going to ask you to search through your phone and search through your emails and extract those and provide them to us so that we can provide them to the public. So that's, I think sometimes people forget that. It's also a good idea to, if you haven't, to create a separate email just for your Planning Commission business, so you're not sorting through a bunch of personal emails as you're looking for something.
As you're looking for the needle in the haystack.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay, fine. And then I just want to go to one last question, and this goes back to a very, very difficult hearing we had on Paseo Nuevo. May I discuss this? Is that okay to bring this up?
If
or-
you use it as an example.
It's an example.
Okay.
Okay. We had 3 meetings on Paseo Nuevo, and in the end, I, as the majority of the commission, I think the whole commission could not support the extension. And two of us developed a set of findings which supported that we could bring to the commission if we were getting the sense that the majority of the commission was not going to accept the lease extension. And I think it was presented to the commission as a, here's the set of findings by staff, and here's the set of findings if you don't support it. Is that all right if we as planning commissioners develop our own findings, if we're going to probably be contrary to, I don't even remember what the staff recommendation was or if there was one, but, or if we were to just make the decision, sometimes there's not a staff recommendation, but I don't remember that far back. But is that okay for us to develop our own findings, or should we have voted to deny the extension and then have staff come back with findings?
No, you can make findings.
Okay.
Just keeping in mind that if you're developing them, say you've received the agenda report and you've read it and you don't agree with staff's findings, it's okay if you were to talk to, one other commissioner
Right,
and say, hey, let's work
yeah.
together. These are,
Which
you
is
just
what-
have to be
which is
careful
what
that you
happened.
don't end up with the wagon wheel or the daisy chain
No.
issue. And bringing those forward, it's good, and that way you're prepared and you can provide them to the staff person and we can implement them. So if you've got them, great.
Okay, and then my last question on
Commissioner
that one,
Wiscombe?
just being that it was such a difficult, series of hearings, when we did present the findings and it looked like we were all going to agree that we were going to deny the lease extension, how do I get those findings, as one of the makers of two of us that made those findings, how do I get that information to the commissioners in a timely manner so they can look over the findings? Because I remember that took some time and, could you repeat that finding? And there was a whole series of findings. But, so how does that get disseminated to the commissioners on the spot so we don't have a fourth hearing on a project or on in that case, a lease
So
extension?
you have a Brown Act issue there that we have
Right.
to overcome. So it would be, you would provide it to the staff, and then staff could provide it. We would have to make it available. As soon as we provided it to everybody on the commission, we have to make it available to the public as well. So there's times when, as we'll come in and give you, there's a memo, we'll catch something, and we'll come that day. And so we'll provide it to you, whether it's you provided the information to us. We just have to make sure that when that happens, we have copies available for the public that we can keep in the back.
Okay, so in that case, I think what happened was staff did email it out to all the commissioners at the time that the motion was made with the findings. I think that's what happened. But that's a really kind of sticky situation because, you don't want to influence anyone. I mean, should that have gone to staff ahead of time as a just in case?
I think that's more of a procedural issue. It'd be nice if we had it, I think, so that we electronically, so we could tweak it as we went. It's if it comes from staff or, what the scenario you're talking about, we have to be careful. If we email you out something you've already talked to one other commissioner, we send things through the Planning Commission secretary and you're blind copied so that you can't respond back to everybody. That's the purpose of why we do it. But that doesn't mean that it went out and then someone got it and then 2 or 3 other people, have talked to the whoever drafted it and we don't know. So that's kind of where you're looking at a wagon wheel scenario where a commissioner or 2 is providing information that gets disseminated and then all of a sudden, without people knowing it, other commissioners are picking up the phone and calling, so.
Yeah, I mean, it was all done during, it was clear when we were in the discussion mode, in the question mode, and just then the discussion mode, that the direction of the commission seemed to be going one way. So it was just tricky. I just wanted to ask the question. I hope it doesn't come up again.
Ms. DeBus, did you have something to add?
Yeah, Commissioner Wiscom, I did just want to add one thing. There may also be cases where your vote change, you haven't made up your mind. That happens during the hearing based on evidence. And so it's absolutely okay if the commission wants to direct staff to return with findings
Right.
based on the communication.
Yeah, and we've done that,
Because it's very
yeah.
difficult to draft those on the spot sometimes, and
Yeah.
sometimes they're lengthy. So that would also be perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much. Thanks again for the presentation. I thought it was very, very helpful. And also the word "because" in findings, I think that's really pretty key. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Of course, thank you as well, Commissioner Wiscom. I have a piggyback question on that before I pass it on to Commissioner Lodge, who's next. With the example that Commissioner Wiscom just provided us, how two commissioners at the time had drafted up findings, I was interested to know, would it have been appropriate in that scenario for the two of them to reach out to staff, or would that have created a problem to help with the findings that they were drafting on their own?
That would not create a Brown Act violation, and it's fine if they were to talk to staff to bring in, say, ahead of time, hey, we're crafting these findings, what do you think? As staff, we have access to information, and we could even help if that's something that they wanted help with.
Excellent. I was just curious about that scenario and how far we can expand. Very good. Next, we have Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last spring, I had to redo my ethics training online, and of course, it includes the Brown Act. And it brought up the issue of texting during meetings. And it seems to me that the purpose of the Brown Act is for transparency. And if commissioners or council members are texting during meetings, you have no idea what they're texting or who they're texting, or maybe they're sending emails to their husband or something like that.
Yeah.
But And the Brown Act doesn't specifically speak to that. And of course, when it was first adopted, we didn't have cell phones and texting, but they apparently have amended in terms of social media. It seems to me that this is like a loophole in the Brown Act. Or I understand there has been at least one case in which the court ruling was that, yes, no, you cannot text. But I don't know, what would you comment on that?
Of course. So I know the case that you're talking about. In that case, it was texting that was occurring and emailing that was occurring outside of the meeting. So in this, and so that is, those were, they needed to come through the Public Records Act. That's why they were being requested. The gray area is you're in the public meeting and you're texting the person at the other end of the dais. It's a public meeting. And so is that a Brown Act violation? Probably not. Because, I mean, you've seen like, council members that, back in the olden days would get up, walk over to the other end of the dais and it's just a really bad optics that you should avoid. There was discussion, I think, at council at one point about whether or not to allow your electronic devices, your cell phones, and whether you can do those or text or look at your email. And I think the council, I don't think they've said no to that, and for various reasons, as Commissioner Lodge says, you may be getting a text from your child or from your spouse, in which case it's emergency, you need to have that to be able to access that. Fortunately, the public doesn't always know what that is, and so it's to use it as sparingly as you can, but I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Commissioner Lodge? Thank you. Next, we have Commissioner DeLucia.
Thank you. I'm learning to use this mic now. Thank you for the really informative presentation. It was a refresher for me since I've actually served on the Planning Commission before in another city, but I did not know about social media since I've come back. That wasn't in the information we had previously. Is it possible to get us a copy of this presentation?
Yes,
for reference?
absolutely.
Okay. The other thing is about disclosures. If somebody approaches us and they give us some information and we come before the body and obviously we make that disclosure and we actually make the disclosure and concisely say what they told us, do we cite the person's name or just say a member of the public, or how do you address that?
If you know the person or it's relevant, it could be just a member of the public or, a friend of mine approached me. As long as there's a frame of reference, someone could ask then and you might, want to say, but a lot of times, you might not know.
Okay. One other question is, the new thing is you reference Rosenberg Rules of Order versus Robert Rules. Is that's something you guys have adopted in Santa Barbara? Have other cities adopted that as well? And why did you change over from Robert's Rules?
So most cities are now adopting Rosenberg's rules as opposed to Robert's. Robert's rules are generally were made more for corporate meetings and also for larger like state legislature meetings and federal meetings where it's a different type of hearing that's occurring. And so Rosenberg, I believe he was a judge, he drafted these specific for local governments. And so they're much simpler. I think they're 16 pages or something like it. It's very short and it's very much geared to how we do our business here. And so we've adopted the city council adopted them a couple years ago, and then we're moving all of our boards and commissions over into Rosenberg's rules. Even if the boards or commissions haven't necessarily adopted them, I still, on the boards that I advise, I still use them as guidance and try and get away from Robert's rules that are very convoluted, and finding anything in them is like, it's a book about that thick, so.
Perhaps we can get a copy of that also.
Roberts or
No,
Rosenberg's?
Rosenberg. I know Robert.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
So those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I don't have another speaker, so I will take a moment to piggyback a question off of Commissioner DeLucia's. He asked the question about if we are to disclose the name of the person who may have approached us to speak to us ex parte, if it's directly related to the project as, for example, the applicant or the appellant, in that scenario, do we disclose their names? Do we say the appellant has spoken with me?
Yes, Chair Bonderson, it would definitely be appropriate. So in that case, it's a relevant party to whatever's happening as appellant or even the property owner. If it's a neighboring property owner, you can always say, I spoke to a neighboring property owner, I spoke to the property owner on the left, on the right. To identify, those are people that have a generally unique interest in the outcome.
Thank you. I will ask the rest of my questions now as well, since there are no other speakers, but if anyone else wants to speak, get ready to push your button. My next question has to do with emails that come in to us from members of the public that have all of our email addresses. And we've seen a few members of the public who, it's clear that they're sending the email to a number of people, and all 7 of us may be included as well. How is that handled? Do we need to send that to you as well, even if you're listed on it? Not you, Ms. Ostringer, but maybe staff or the PC secretary. If we can recognize within the list of names that staff of some caliber has been included, do we need to do that extra step to say, for example, Ms. DeBusk, I got this email in case you didn't know. What is the procedure you'd like us to follow when all 7 of us are contacted, but not through the secretary.
If you see that all 7 of you have been contacted, but Ms. DeBusk is not on there, or, then you should forward it to her and the Planning Commission secretary and just say, I got this. If you can see that it was clearly sent to staff, we'll take care of it from there.
Okay. And if we do see staff's name, we just don't need to do an extra step?
It's
Or-
up to you. I mean, if well, I don't want to speak for Ms. DeBusk.
What would you like us to do? What's
Chair
appropriate?
Bonderson, I would say if you think about it and want to forward to the PC secretary, that would be great in case it, just slips through my radar. That way we can make sure that Ms. Ostringer and everyone that needs to see it has officially seen it. You never know, a commissioner might have changed their email address and maybe that wasn't the latest. So that's always safe if you think about it. If not, I will always do my best to forward it as well.
Thank you. And I'm going to repeat a question that we heard earlier from Commissioner Wiscombe. I've been sort of thinking about the answer, and I guess I want to hear it again, or I just want more clarity. It was the question about how do we protect the privacy or the trust between a member of the public who may have reached out to us that perhaps we, in the scenario that was presented, may not want to share because we don't want to break that trust. What was your response? Do we still need to provide that, or are we okay not providing that?
So it's an ex parte communication.
Nonetheless.
It's, right, so it's communication that you've gotten in some way outside of the hearing. It's, if you know no one else has gotten it, you're not providing it to the rest of the group, then I would, at the hearing, say, I received this email from X, and it said X. And it's possible that someone will hear that and make a Public Records Act request and get it from you.
Got it. But we would not need to necessarily automatically send it. We just need to provide it here on the dais,
It would-
verbally.
It would be nice if you sent it, but yes.
See where I'm going with this? Okay. All right, I got the answer. Clear thing, well, much more clearly this time. Thank you for the your patience. My next question is it considered ex parte communication if we speak about a project or a scenario that belongs here with a council member? We didn't see that listed or talked about when you were presenting. How does a council member fit into the puzzle?
So in that scenario, it would be, say it was an appeal of a planning commission decision. It would be generally an ex parte communication if that planning commissioner reached out to you to talk about something.
If we were council members?
If, yeah, or I'm saying a council members. The ex parte communication is going towards the council member, so they're the one that has the decision. If it's a decision in front of you and a council member reaches out to you and says, I know this property and I think this is a horrible idea, and that's ex parte communications. Hopefully a council member is not going to do that. But it's a communication from someone coming to you.
I'm going to expand on this question. So if the project has been with us and it is now being, let's say in this case, appealed, it's moving on to council, they reach out to us, we don't have any place to express the ex parte communication because our role is complete. It now falls into their wheelhouse to say that they've spoken to a planning commissioner when it comes before them here in chambers. Is that
Right.
the step? If we were to see a project here, and we are particularly curious or interested in the support or feedback or advice or position of a council member, before we see that project here, does that fall into ex parte communication? Because it doesn't, I guess it's because of who they are in relationship to us. I don't know if that counts as ex parte.
There might be a Brown Act issue there as well, because it's a majority. You have to think about it too, is it's not just you as one body, you're representing another larger, they're representing the large body that's trickling down to you. So that's why, from an aside, when we create committees or groups, you have to be careful. It could be 3 of you and 3 council members, so that's not a majority of either body, but when you come together, then it can be a Brown Act thing, so just be careful. And, I mean, they're the elected officials that have appointed you. It's, it's entirely within the realm of imagination that they would contact you to talk about something, keeping in mind that this happens sometimes, and when, that a decision might not be unanimous by this body, a quasi-judicial decision. It could be, there's two opposing that couldn't vote in favor. As commissioners, you represent the body as a whole. So there is no individual you. It's not appropriate for you to come to like a council thing and say, well, and, I oppose it because of X, Y, and Z. You have to remember that the Planning Commission didn't oppose it. Like, this was the decision, and you kind of go along for the ride.
That's an excellent example. I'm really happy that I provoked that explanation. Thank you so much. I have only one other question. It doesn't fall directly into Brown Act, like what you're talking about in a conversation, but perhaps how you get into that scenario. I did a economic conflict training this last year, and there was a lot of detail placed on going out to coffee or going out to lunch and who's paying for the lunch, and how quickly in a year, in a 12-month year, you add up to $50. I mean, nowadays coffees are at $10. You have 5 coffees and you hit your limit and you have to disclose it. Is there anything that has to do with us getting together? For example, you mentioned here that we could get together with staff as long as we're not talking about a project per se, but is there any advice that you have for us about who pays for what or not offering or treating? Do you have any just thoughts on that?
Yes, make sure you take your AB 1234 training, which talks about this. It's, as you mentioned, there's a dollar threshold, and so there's exceptions to the gift. It's considered a gift. So it's, I don't want to get too far in the ethics thing, but it's, do you generally reciprocate? Like, are you friends? Like, is this someone you would normally go out and treat to lunch, or is this, not something you would normally do? My practice is I usually just go Dutch.
Perfect. Great answer. And now we have 2 more speakers. I have Commissioner Lodge again. Would you like to ask some questions?
Well, I actually wanted to make some comments.
Great.
As you know, I've been around a long time. And a long time ago, I decided to simplify my life. And when anybody wanted to speak to me about a project, individually, I said, my policy always has been that I want to hear the same thing that my colleagues, wherever they are here, at the same time. And no, I will not meet with you. That simplifies things. And on paying for things, I always paid for my own bill. I always have this feeling that if somebody else pays for it, they think I owe them something. I don't want that.
That's just good advice as a parent, I think.
Yeah, it simplifies things. Thank you.
Thank you. That was nice to hear. We have Commissioner DeLucia.
Thank you for asking some excellent questions. I think the way to go is Dutch. One final question about if you receive letters from folks or somebody and they don't want you to disclose who they are, and short of sending it on to the staff before the body as a disclosure, can you disclose that you received the letter and what they were talking about without citing their name? Is that a compromise?
I would say I received a letter from a member of the public that said X, Y, and Z.
And just leave it at that? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, well, next we have Commissioner Bauke.
I've got more of a global question, which is, and this goes back to social media, and this body gets into some very, very big policy issues. what is the rule as to speaking like about the housing crisis as sort of a general topic? Can we talk about that in social media, or are we refrained from discussing it at all? Or that's a pretty good example of something that might be in the public discourse. It's very broad and not to a particular thing that's before us at any particular time.
Right, that's actually a really good question. Because it is something that, in that case, the housing crisis, that could potentially come where we're doing, tweaking the average unit size density, or we're going to come to you to update our state density bonus ordinance partner that we have at the city. There could be an argument that, yeah, that's, that even though it's broad, that if someone liked you back from the commission, that it could be a violation. That's one I'd kind of want to look at
Okay.
I think if you're going to have those type of like policy decisions on your social media, it's just better as a commission not to like them, have other commissioners like that topic.
Okay, thank you.
And we have Commissioner Wardlow.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for this presentation. This was very helpful. I do have a question kind of aligned with what everybody's hinting at. So we are, as individuals, though, we can still note our thoughts on different topics in the public realm, but we are not representing that is the position of the Planning Commission of Santa Barbara. That's just my position as Devin Wardlow.
Yes, so if you do that, you have to come as speaking and state, I'm not speaking as a planning commissioner, I'm speaking for myself.
So in the interwebs, as well as if you were to speak at council.
Right.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I don't have anyone else in queue. Are there any other last-minute questions before I open it to public comment? Do we have any speakers who may like to speak here today?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. We do have one speaker slip for ePlanet Thunderstriker.
And will you be taking the time?
Yes.
Keeping the time? Thank you. Please let him know when you'd like him to begin the timer. Whenever you're ready, sir.
Okay. It was a lot easier before you guys started asking questions. So I got like this grayscale on what is and isn't ex parte communication with public, just generally. And then on things that are within things that you guys do. Clearly something that's already on the agenda, that's like, you don't go there. But like, for instance, like I made some suggestions to Isla Vista. They're getting like this big 12-foot sidewalk. And I was like, well, we could do sponsor donor bricks or whatever and get some colored concrete or something. And that's something I was going to maybe talk to other people here about in the future. And of course, the desalinization. I've already made comments on that a few different times about different places. So I was like, well, if there's not something on the agenda already, but it's something that I'm clearly talking to somebody, like if I go over to 630 and to the address Ernst. So anyways, I don't know. And then when people started talking, like they just get an email from something, I wasn't clear on if it's not on the agenda, if they can't talk to anybody about it because, getting back to that, because I was thinking, well, there's just so many things about this whole thing that I don't know, which is why I came here to listen to this. Like, you guys do motions or staff directives, resolutions, proclamations, all those things she didn't encompass, and understandably, that's not part of why she's here spending time with you guys. But I didn't know things like that, so I was trying to better understand things like that. And I was trying to listen and make notes. And so somebody said something about having discussion with council, and I was like, well, maybe normally it would be okay, and unless it goes to them and it goes back on appeal. And she didn't say that, and I didn't know if that would help clarify her question. But mostly, yeah. And the other thing is, because I have, and it's not pertaining to the planning commission, I'm sorry, but because I have so many. A vast majority of items pertaining to council, it's like it would seem it would almost be ex parte communications. But I would just talk to somebody about it. I know the mayor can make appointments with people, so I guess it would just be what is not the great part of exportation for things that are not on the agenda, but they're also not strictly personal items? I think that's it.
Thank you so much for speaking here today. And I just want to close this item by saying thank you to Ms. Ostringer. I'm always enthusiast for training. I think we always have an opportunity to learn more and certainly refresh our memory and understand things that we may not have thought about before. And the fact that these hearings are also recorded gives the opportunity to the public to listen and understand what we may not be in a position to talk about up here. I think that that is a common question I get, whether it's ex parte realm or not, is the fact that there are very clear boundaries. And our role as planning commissioners have boundaries that we cannot step out of, and this type of training reminds us all of that. So thank you so much, Ms. Ostringer. Our next, now we'll move on to our administrative item. And we have item 4 on the agenda, which is a post-construction update for Cottage Hospital, which is their first year report following the completion of construction. Staff has provided us all, the Planning Commission, with a report. Mr. Busk is here today to take any questions you may have. So does the commission have any questions on that report? I can also take comments at this time. First, we have Commissioner Lodge, pardon me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a related question. Since the redo of the hospital and the tearing down of St. Francis Hospital and the construction of the big housing development there, part of which was part of it is reserved for Cottage employees, and part of them are affordable, and perhaps all of them are. I would love to have a report on that and how that has worked out. Would that be a possibility, Mr. Busk?
Chair Bonderson and Commissioner Lodge, I can certainly ask. I can't force them, but I can certainly ask the question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. That's actually something I'm interested in, too. Thank you for asking that question. Commissioner Wiscombe, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to say I've been through several of the Cottage Hospital reports, and they're always very informative. This one was, and it's the first one that's post-construction. And I just wanted to congratulate the members of Cottage Hospital on how well they've done and the smooth process they've gone through. It's been an enormous project for many years, and we're so fortunate to have this facility and the modernization of so many parts of it. So I just really wanted to say that, and I'm excited to see that we're now in the post-construction phase, and they did a great job throughout the years of recycling construction materials and demolition materials, and the facility is really beautiful. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. That is a wonderful comment to have on record. Are there any other questions or comments at this time? Yes, we have Commissioner DeLucia.
Yeah, I actually walk around the hospital cottage. It's a nice walk, and they really do keep the grounds well manicured, and the fig tree and the fig tree is looking really healthy and well trimmed. So I just wanted to call that out because I think that was one of the concerns in the construction of Cottage Hospital.
Thank you. And I just want to add that growing up here, I've been to that hospital a number of times, sometimes for good reasons and exciting reasons, and others for not so pleasant purposes. And just being in there recently, seeing how upgraded and beautiful it is inside makes the experience a lot better, even when it's not on the best terms. So I just am always happy to see this progress and these reports are so well received. Thank you so much for all the hard work, and keep it up. We look forward to the next report. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I do not have any speaker slips. If there is anyone joining virtually who'd like to speak on this item, please raise your hand and we can call on you. Not seeing any raised hands, and then we did not receive any written correspondence, so back to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sparza. Now we will go ahead and close that item and move on to the rest of our administrative agenda. The next item is appointment of advisory board liaisons, and I will be facilitating this effort as we go through the list that is found in our packet. It is on page 2 of 4, item 4B, Exhibit 1. There's 2 pages of it, and we will go ahead and just run through this in order. I'll do it in alphabetical order as it's provided to us on the sheet, and if there's no change, we just want to remain silent, that's fine. If anyone would like to volunteer or ask to change or any other comments on the item, I will just ask you to push your button. So we are going to start with the Airport Commission. This is currently held by Commissioner Wardlow as the primary, and the alternate is available, the alternate position. Is anyone interested in that, or would Commissioner Wardlow? I'm going to start with Commissioner Wardlow. Are you interested in keeping it?
Thank you, Chair. No, I'm not, and I'd love to pass it on to our newest commissioner if he is interested.
And I would accept, thank you, if the body's okay with that.
If there's no one else interested, we'll go ahead and, Ms. Dubusky, you and I are both keeping record. We'll check at the end, make sure we got this all right. Okay, thank you. So, DeLuccio, okay. And do we have anyone interested in the alternate role for this? Commissioner Boss?
Yes, I'm interested in serving as the alternate role for this.
Thank you. Next, we're going to ABR. I hold the primary. We have Commissioner Lodge as alternate. I would like to keep primary. Commissioner Lodge, are you interested in commenting?
Commissioner Boss has expressed interest in being the alternate, and that's fine with me.
Very good. Commissioner Boss, you're okay with taking this on? Okay, we have Commissioner Boss as alternate. Commissioner Lodge, thank you. Next, we'll go to Creeks Restoration and Advisory. We have primary as Commissioner Lodge, alternate as Commissioner Wiscombe. Is there any interest to trade or any comments on this one?
I'm happy to stay as the alternate.
I'm happy to stay as primary.
Excellent. Thank you. Next, Downtown Parking Committee. We have both vacant positions, both for primary and alternate. Is there any interest? Commissioner Balke
I'd be interested in being the alternate.
and Commissioner Boss.
I'm interested in serving as primary.
Okay, and I was going to come to you.
No, I don't, that's good.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, I served on that, and it's really early, but you really learn a lot. It's really a great committee.
Wonderful. And I'm just going to comment that I'm not seeing names pop up on my screen, so if you are interested in talking, hit your request to speak button. I'm seeing you and I'm calling on you, but if I'm looking one direction, I might miss the other side of my face, so please don't hesitate. The next one is Harbor Commission, and we have Commissioner Wiscombe as primary, and Commissioner, the alternate position is vacant. Is there any interest in either?
Which one is that?
It's Harbor Commission.
I'd like to stay as primary, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there any interest for alternate for this role?
I'm interested in alternate.
Thank you. Any other interest there? Or are we okay with assigning it to Commissioner Boss? Okay. Next, we have HLC, Historical Landmarks Committee. We have Commissioner Lodge as primary and Balke as alternate. Is there any change or interest here?
Madam Chair, Commissioner DeLuccio spoke to me, expressed his interest in it. I was kind of surprised to see that I was the one with way more primary assignments than anybody else. So I guess I'm going to be divesting myself of them. In any event, it's fine for me, with me, if he would like to be the primary to HLC.
Wow, thank you very much for volunteering that. And is there any interest in?
Yes, I have
here?
interest. Thank you.
For primary? And we also have Commissioner Bauke as alternate. Would you like to keep
Like
that?
to retain.
Very good. Okay. Next, we have Parks and Rec. We have Commissioner Wardlow as primary, Wiscom as alternate. Would you like to keep or change?
I'd like to offer if Commissioner Wiscom would like to be primary, and I will be alternate.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies. We'll switch those up. Moving right along, we have Single Family Design Board, and we have Commissioner Lodge as primary. Alternate is available. Is there any interest or trade?
I would like to be alternate.
Alternate? Anyone else? Any other change? Commissioner Lodge, you're happy keeping that as primary?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, we have Wardlow as alternate. Now we have Staff Hearing Officer Liaison that was recently assigned to Commissioner Boss as primary, but we do not have an, actually, that's not true. I'm the alternate. Is there anyone interested in taking the alternate? I would like to give it up if it's possible.
We just did that.
No, the alternate position of Staff Hearing Officer. It's me. It doesn't meet very often.
I'll do the alternate.
Thank you, Commissioner Wardlow. Next, we have Sustainable Council Committee. It has no set schedule. It meets as needed. I'm not even sure if it meets often, but we have Commissioner Lodge as primary and Escobedo as alternate, means it's vacant now. Is there any interest for either? Would you like to keep that?
I'm happy keeping it. They don't meet very frequently, every couple of months, maybe.
Okay,
But
that's good to know.
And I'd be happy to be the alternate,
Okay, well, thank you.
unless someone else wants it. I'm happy to take it.
Okay, well, if no one else wants it, we'll let it go to Commissioner Wiscom. Thank you. Next, we have Transportation and Circulation Committee. I am the primary, and we have Commissioner Wardlow as alternate. I'd like to keep primary. Would you like to keep alternate? Anybody else interested in alternate?
I'll take it I'll take it, because.
Are you willing to give it up?
Yeah,
You're okay with
she
that?
just said, yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, you want to keep it, you can. Yeah.
Well, that's nice. We're trading around a bit. Thank you. Next, we have Water Commission. We have Commissioner Wiscom as primary, Wardlow as alternate.
If someone else is interested in that, I would
You'd be
give
happy
it
to
up if,
Any takers? It's Water Commission. It meets at 9 a.m. on the third Thursday of the month. Does it meet every month?
yes. Almost every month, without exception, yes.
Okay. No takers?
I can take it as a primary.
Are you sure? Okay.
Would you like to be alternate, or would you
Sure.
like to pass that on? Okay, we can switch it around then. That one is nice and easy. Next, we have Highway 101 Improvements Design Working Group. Is this still meeting, or is it done? Okay. So, and then, these are all in green. Are they all sea level rise working group? Is that still available?
Chair Bonderson, that
Yes.
is no longer,
Okay. Santa Barbara Design Standards, is that one still available?
design standards, yes.
Okay.
And so those are temporary committees, and the intent is that we would keep.
Who's on them?
Who's on there unless there's a vacancy.
Yes, I was aware of it, I just didn't know which ones we should keep. So we have Bauke, Commissioner Bauke and Commissioner Wardlow as the primary and alternate respectively. We have Plaza de la Guerra Working Group, is that one still active?
no,
Commissioner?
it's not.
Oh,
Oh, the
It may be, yes.
It could be, okay, so we're
Yes,
going to
I
leave.
think there's still some components that I think the committee
May come back.
may come back on.
Okay,
So-
very good, then we'll leave it on the list, and we'll leave both Commissioner Wiscom and Lodge as primary. Next, we have Sign Ordinance Review Committee, is that one, no, that one's gone. We have Water Vision Stakeholder Group, is that one still active? Okay, and we have a vacancy for primary on that. Is anyone interested?
That'd be interesting.
Yes? Any other interest? We can give it to Commissioner Bauke. And last but not least, State Street Advisory Committee, I'm the primary, and I will stay as the primary. So that can, oh, wait,
Yeah, there's more in there.
there's another, well, the other side is almost identical. I guess I was using a different list. I didn't realize there was a shorter list. Signs? Signs, she just said that signs is not. Did I miss anything on the list you were following? Okay. I just used the longer version of this list, and I didn't realize that some things had been removed. My apologies, Mr. Busk, for the redundancy. Would you like to read back, and we can just make sure we have it, or would you like me to just give you my copy later?
I would ask the question to Ms. Ostringer. Should I read it and then they can make a motion, or can I just read it and that is all that we need?
There should be a motion.
Okay, so I will go through the appointments. For Airport Commission, we have DeLuccio and Boss as alternate. For ABR, Bonderson as primary, Boss as alternate. Creeks Advisory Committee, Lodge as primary, Wiscombe as alternate. Downtown Parking Committee, Boss as primary, Bauke as alternate. Harbor Commission, Wiscombe
Wait,
as,
I'm sorry.
either,
Downtown parking, could you read it again?
I had Boss as primary and Bauke as alternate.
It should be the other way around,
Was it, is that? Okay.
right?
No,
I have myself as primary.
yeah. Oh, you did? Yes.
How did we do that wrong? We both did it.
No, that's.
Okay, so just to repeat the correct version, go ahead, Mr. Busk.
Thank you. Downtown Parking Committee, Boss as primary, Bauke as alternate. Harbor Commission, Wiscombe as primary, Boss as alternate. HLC, DeLuccio primary, Bauke alternate. Parks and Rec Commission, Wiscombe primary, Wardlow alternate. Single Family Design Board, Lodge primary, Wardlow alternate. Staff Hearing Officer, Boss primary, Wardlow alternate. Sustainability Council Committee, Lodge primary, Wiscombe alternate. Transportation and Circulation Committee, Bonderson primary, DeLuccio alternate. Water Commission, Wardlow primary, Wiscombe alternate. Santa Barbara Design Standards remains Bauke as primary, Wardlow alternate. Plaza de la Guerra remains Lodge and Wiscombe as primary. Water Vision Stakeholders Group, Bauke is primary. And State Street Advisory Committee, Bonderson remains as primary.
That matches mine as well. Sorry for the confusion on that one. All right, so we need to have a motion to put this forward. Do we have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to make a motion to approve the 2023 PC liaisons as we have discussed today. Thank
And
you.
I'll second that motion.
Hold on a second. Did you want a second?
Yeah, I was going to say that.
I don't know why, but the screen, or are you guys pushing buttons? Because I've got nothing on my screen in a while.
I did push the
Yeah,
request.
I saw you push it. That's why I
Yeah.
was asking.
But it's not showing up
Yeah.
on your thing.
So I'll
Yeah.
just keep moving along, and we will accept Commissioner.
Actually, I'm going to restate my motion.
Let's do that.
I move the 2023 PC liaison appointments as discussed today. Thank you.
I was going to make a joke about that afterwards, so you caught yourself. And Commissioner DeLuccia, do we have a second to the corrected motion-making process?
Well, I guess I'll second it, but I apologize, I did not press my button.
It's okay, we're all learning here. The screen is new, and apparently it's not working. Can you push your button for a moment? Yeah, nothing's happening. So I'm just following fingers here. Oh, it came like a minute late, just at the end of the meeting. Okay, so here we go. Let's move on. We need to do a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Boss?
Yes.
Commissioner DeLuccio?
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge?
Yes.
Commissioner Wardlow?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
Vice Chair Bauke?
Yes.
And Chair Bonderson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll now move on to the last item, which is staff hearing officer liaison report first. Do we have any news, Commissioner Boss?
No report.
No report today. All right, and then last but not least, are there any liaison reports? We have a few buttons. I'm assuming this, okay, I'm going to start with Commissioner Wiscom, please.
No, those are old buttons.
Yeah, I know,
think
that one's old as well. So
Yeah.
I'm going to, oh,
Oh.
you were up there on purpose.
No, I don't know why the button went off.
It's okay. Okay, we are going to move to Commissioner Lodge, which may be the real person who wants to present here.
Yeah, it seems to work when I push the button. Yesterday, the Creeks Advisory Committee met, and they had a report on the activities over the past year. They review hundreds of permits, all relating to stormwater, and they and their work. They did over 550 permits, and over 800 inspections. Because it's, once the permit's got granted, they have to go out and make sure that it's done right. So very, very busy with that. The other part of the meeting was a report by the general manager, Cameron Benson, on the effects of the January 9th storm. And he didn't get out to film or look at in person in many of the creeks because it was too scary. But there were some individuals who sent him some, and it was very impressive to see Mission Creek just flooding through Oak Park. And it was like, it was a couple of inches under the bridges around there. And there was a lot of runoff into the new portion of the runoff from the bird refuge, and all kinds of trash, including a kitchen sink. Literally a kitchen sink. And there was another bridge that had under it a sewer line, and you probably all heard that there were a couple of sewage leaks. And this one, the speculation was that the floodwaters in some cases had whole trees coming down it, and that the water level was way up to where it was reaching the sewer line, and that something, say a tree, hit it, and it just completely severed it. So, generally the city did pretty well, considering that it was, almost 7 inches downtown alone, and then, way more up at San Marcos Pass and 8 inches at my house. So it was as one of the weather people said, it was an impressive storm.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. We have Commissioner Wiscom, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow through on Commissioner Lodge's comments, if you really want to watch a very informative presentation on our water supply and the storm, there was a council presentation a couple weeks ago, I think, 2 weeks ago, yeah, Mr. Busk is confirming that, 2 weeks ago on by our water department, and it was really quite informative. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscom. Are there any other liaison reports? No, if not, I will provide a report for ABR. And since we saw each other last in January, there are 5 projects of interest that have come forth at ABR. I will just read them off in order, starting chronologically. So project number 1 that I'd like to talk about came before ABR on January 30th, 2023. It is a continued item that came in for project design approval and received the project design approval at 425 Santa Barbara Street. This is a project consisting of constructing 4-story a 4-story, 19-unit residential apartment building that's comprised of 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms, I should actually give you some numbers, 1 2-bedroom, 8 1-bedroom, and 10 studio units, and complies with the ADU program. Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring it forward to you all, because we saw this project. It's a familiar project to us, and we've been seeing a lot of kind of follow-through and completion on projects that were with us last year. The next one is also another familiar project. It's at 701 North Milpas Street. We see this one all over the place, not just at PC. This was heard on January 23rd at ABR. It received project design approval, and just as a quick reminder, it's a new 4-story mixed-use ADU project on the corner of Milpas and Ortega. Also seen on January 23rd, we had another continued item for project design approval, and it did receive approval at, the address is located at 515 West Los Olivos, oh my God, I always say that wrong. Los Olivos. Wow. That's a tongue twister for me. Don't ask me why, I have no idea. It's a proposal for 6 residential units comprising of 2-story duplexes and a 3-story fourplex using ADU, our ADU program. And then we have another continued item that received a project design approval at 414 West Cannon Perdido Street. This is also a 2-story, 2-unit residential building using the AUD program. So we're seeing a lot of ADU projects getting project design approval. Very exciting stuff for housing. And last but not least, on the same date, we received one more project that, we saw one more project that received project design approval at 425 Garden Street. And it is the construction of a 4-story, 36-unit residential complex with common rooftop amenities. And this project is proposing 2 moderate income rental units, 4 very low income rental units, and 30 market rate rental units. And that concludes the ABR report. As a lot, but it's also because we haven't seen each other in a while. And we may not see each other again for a while. We have next week off, but our next hearing is tentatively scheduled for March 2nd. If there are no other comments, I saw you going for it. Here we go. Commissioner Wiscombe?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say I appreciate the way you presented this with the dates and what happened at ABR and with the addresses. I thought it's a really convenient way for us to be able to go back and review the meetings if we want. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome, and certainly to recognize some of the addresses as well. All right, and Commissioner DeLuccio?
I actually have my speaker thing on. When you give these reports, is it possible to tell us how many are low or mod units
I
in the
can
projects?
tell you when it's listed on,
Yeah.
and I did today.
Yeah,
Those are
I
the
did
only-
see that.
Those are only the ones that were provided.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't mean that the others may not have them. They just weren't highlighted in the project descriptions that are then reviewed and then used as the minutes. If you're uniquely curious about those kinds of projects coming through, I'm sure we can ask the ABR staff to share.
Yeah, I would find that really interesting to know, since we talk about housing and
Yes.
and the housing crisis we're having, and we need to get more low to mod in the city. So,
Right.
But thank you for your report, because I did write the addresses down, which I found very helpful too.
Wonderful, and you're probably
Yeah.
going to see that on HLC as well. There might be something that brings in some housing. Let me direct a question to Ms. DeBusk. I don't want to speak out of turn. Can Commissioner DeLuccio or any of us request an update on housing numbers? I know we saw that, was it a few commission hearings ago? And like updated housing numbers of recent projects that are being approved?
Chair Bonderson, I can see what types of reports we have that might break it out that way. I know it's something we had to do for the housing element.
Yes.
And so we may have updated figures because of that.
Thank you. I didn't want to volunteer information that you may not have. Okay, well, if there are no comments, any further comments at this time, I can go ahead and adjourn our hearing. Oh, I do have a comment myself, silly me. It's sitting right in front of me. I did not want to forget. If anyone is interested in the State Street Advisory Committee, we are having our first advisory meeting of the year in about 15 minutes. So I need to adjourn this and get over there. So I'll adjourn at 2:46 p.m. today, and that will conclude our February 17 Planning Commission hearing. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Have a great day.